wins the prize today?
Are you going to share your wigs with her?
You never know what you're going to get. That's the thing. That's the thing about us at JLA. You never know what you're going to get. So,
Okay.
we've got somebody in Kentucky watching. I love it. I love it. I'm waiting on the Good Morning Vietnam. Does anybody else, when I say good morning like that, Vietnam just automatically comes out as like, good morning, Vietnam. Like, I can't not say that. Say that around a 16-year-old and they look at you like you've lost your mind. So yeah, my kid looked at me the other day. He was like, what's wrong with you? I was like, you won't understand. You're not there yet.
Spencer said it.
Yeah.
It's in the thread.
Spencer's on it. Kim, good morning from Humble. You're such a wild one, Kim. Like, I love it. We had a group on. We had a group on from Abilene yesterday, which I thought was awesome. They got the Zoom info from Moms of Real Estate. Somebody posted it. This group was on. I got a message from them afterwards. Thought it was super cool. Love that stuff. Love it. So, all right. Get a few more people in here.
Starting on this morning.
I'm sorry. Oh, I missed
what page number are you starting on?
Oh, we're going to start on, go down to sellers. If you've printed this off, go down. We're going to start on the seller side. So we're going to pick right up on that, which I've redone mine a little bit from what's online. So I can't tell you what page number that is. Just go to the sellers. That's where we're going to start. So, all right. A few more people coming in here. Amanda's and Crosby. You guys are all us Ubble Crosby people. We're getting excited. All right. Give people a few more minutes and we'll roll into this. Just as a housekeeping, yesterday's call I've already uploaded on the Facebook page. So if you weren't able to get in yesterday, you absolutely can watch that. And not have a problem. Heck yeah, we just crossed 301, so we did solve our problem from yesterday. Kim got on with Zoom and made sure that I called Zoom afterwards. I think they got tired of hearing from us yesterday, but yeah, we crossed the 300 mark. We're rocking and rolling today. So you can watch yesterday's. It is recorded. It's on the Facebook page. I will be dropping it into. I'll drop both of these into Back Agent sometime the next day or so. And we'll get that set up. I will tell you that after the call today, I am picking up my daughter. We're headed to the airport. We're going to Nashville for the weekend. We're going to view the University of Tennessee and hit a concert there. Zach Bryan, which I don't know all of his music, but my kid's excited about it. So I will be available, but probably better if you have questions to hit me via email or text. Not a problem. I'm going to be around. So, Definitely. I tried to get Amanda to take my spot, but she didn't want to go for some reason. I don't know. Like, take my spot and go watch that, but she didn't jump on it. All right. I think let's roll with this. So we're going to recap yesterday just a little bit. Just a little bit of recap. It goes something like this. When you're sitting down with your buyers, you're going to have to talk to them. And it's a real simple conversation when you get to the commission section. And it goes like this. We're going to be looking at homes. Some sellers are going to pay me my amount. Some sellers are going to pay me my amount. Some sellers are going to pay partial my amount, which is 3% because that's what I put in here. And then some people are not going to pay me at all. So we need to have a discussion about what houses you want me to show you. You want me to show you all of them? Do you want me to show you only the ones that pay me my full amount? You tell me, you're in charge. I'm going to show you any house you want to look at. But just know, if we look at a house where the seller's not paying me, I have to get paid. Okay. So if you have that conversation easy up front, then they can pick and choose what that looks like. They can pick and choose. So, they may say, hey, only show me houses where you're getting paid. I don't have the extra cash. And yes, that's steering, but they're the ones that are in charge of that. If your buyer says, I don't want to see houses where I have to pay you, then you can legally steer them away from those houses. And I think you're going to see a ton of that. If I'm a buyer in the market today and I've got limited funds and I want to put it all towards my 30-year mortgage, my down payment and closing costs, then yeah, I don't want to see those houses where I've got to pay you because that's going to cut into what I can afford. So there's that piece of it. Real simple. Okay. You're just going to have those conversations. Now, the other conversation is that we have to have a buyer's rep to go show houses. Point blank simple. There is no like scenario where you don't. And it's going to be monitored by the MLS. They're going to do checks on this. So please make sure that you have it in place. Then when you're writing your contract, there are 2 forms that guarantee you're going to get paid. Okay. So when you're talking, I suggest you start texting these listing agents, trying to call them. I just think a text works. Say, hey, I want to show 122 Pinelands Park Lane. What are you paying for buyer's compensation? Once you get that text message is great, but it's not legal and binding. Okay. It isn't. And so then you're going to use one of 2 forms, 2406, which is amendment regarding broker fees, which is an amendment to the 1-to-4 contract. That's one form that goes in your package with your 1-to-4 contract over. Buyer's going to sign it, seller's going to sign it. The other form that you're going to use is 2402, which is your compensation agreement between brokers. Now, you're not going to send that to your buyer and your sellers. That's not part of your package. You're going to send that straight to the listing agent. The listing agent is going to sign that and say, yes, we're paying you 3%. Now, that's how you know you're going to get paid. We can send those documents to the title company, and it's going to be part of the process. So that's always been an issue. Everybody's worried about how we're going to get paid. How are we going to get paid? That's how you're going to get paid. You got to do the paperwork right. But I guarantee you, we just talked about this in the office. Kim, Scott, Jonathan Stickle and I were just talking about this. There's going to be agents that have no clue that there's contract changes. I think it was Melissa Jenny was talking to somebody yesterday, another agent, another brokerage, didn't even know that contracts were changing, had no idea. Scary. But there's going to be agents out here that go show houses to buyers. They're going to give a buyer, they're going to get them under contract, and they're getting ready to go to the closing table, and they're going to do their CDA, and they're going to send it over, and they're like, yeah, you're not getting paid because you didn't do your documents. We never agreed to pay anything. Nobody agreed to pay. You're not getting anything. So they've done this whole contract for free. It's going to happen. Absolutely going to happen. And then they're going to be all upset and they're going to be cranky. Well, that's because you're not getting educated. And that's a big part of what I talked about yesterday. Okay. Big part of what I talked about yesterday. So as it was yesterday, here's Kim, Amanda, and my phone number and email addresses. We love text messages. We do. We respond well to those. But you can email us. You can call us. I talked to quite a few people yesterday. That's great. Kim and Amanda are managing the chat bar. I don't even have the chat bar up. I don't know what's going on over there because I can't. You don't need any more distraction in this head of mine. So they're managing the chat bar. We appreciate them doing that. They know what's going on. For those of you that may not be JLA that are on here, and because we invite everybody to these things, understand a lot of this is my opinion. I talked about this yesterday. I'm going to reiterate it again. A lot of this is my opinion. I'm very opinionated and passionate about certain things. I don't mean to offend anybody, and your broker may not always agree with the things I say, but what I'm telling you works and is right on whatever level that I choose to jump on. That being said, I think there's a lot of confusion out here. I said this yesterday. I've watched a lot of these videos and I've watched a lot of these webinars, and man, some of these people they don't even answer any questions. They say, hey, you got some new forms. They take an hour telling you there are new forms. Well, we already know that. Tell me how to use them. Tell me what this looks like. And in typical boot camp fashion, we went all through the buyers yesterday. Today, we're going to go through the whole selling process, working with a seller, working your way through a listing, not just the new forms, but everything, because you cannot get enough education. The key to this whole thing, as you roll into real estate, the new era, this is a new era of real estate. The key to this whole thing as you move into the new era of real estate is if you're not sharp, if you're not confident and competent, and with competency comes confidence, by the way, the more you know, the more comfortable you feel explaining it and doing it. When they say the cream rises to the top, it absolutely is going to in the real estate world we're living in right now. But that cream is educated. It's sharp. It knows what it's doing. It goes out here. It's buttoned up. It has all the forms. It can explain the forms. That's what's going to happen. And for those people, again, why there's not 800 people on the call today because I have room for 1,000. I don't know. What are they doing? How are they getting educated? What does that look like? So just know, I'm going to tell you, there's probably not 20% of the real estate market right now. And I think I'm being generous at 20% of the Houston or the whole Texas real estate market that understands what's going on, that knows what's happening and is going to know how to use these forms. So those of you that use these and step up and step out are going to be in a great spot. Your business is going to thrive, because guess what? We as consumers, take real estate out, think of yourself as a consumer. We as consumers only want to work with those people we feel comfortable and confident with. You know, you don't go to your dentist and you walk in and like, yeah, you need a root canal. I've not really done one, but we're going to figure it out together. You're getting out of that chair and leaving as quick as possible. You're like, no, not on me, you're not. So you got to go into this confident. You got to go into it positive, and you got to walk the walk and talk the talk. And that's why we're on here. We have upcoming live boot camps where you do get your C class. I suggest every one of you try to make one. Yet with these two are already on the books. There are going to be more. Okay. They're going to be more. There's going to be one in pretty much every area. I know that we'll have one out down in Beaumont this fall. We'll have one in Kingwood this fall. Get to one of these, because as good as this is on Zoom, it's 1,000 times better live, because you've got more people, you've got more energy. We dive into different things, and you get 4 hours of CE for it. So mark your calendars. We're going to go through the facts again. I had several people reach out to me yesterday, and they had questions on this. So we're going to walk through this again. June 24th, which was Monday. If you go into Zip Forms, Transaction Desk, Dot Loop right now, the new forms are in there. Now, August 17th is our drop dead date on this. The MLS is the buyer's compensation is not going to be on the MLS. Okay. So between now and then, that's the question, right? Between now and then, if you get presented an offer on the old form, you can use it. No big deal. If somebody somehow has the old form and they submit you an offer on the old paperwork and all that, which the 1 to 4 didn't change anyway, but if they submit you an offer on what, you're fine. Okay, the 1 to 4 didn't change. Maybe it doesn't have any of the new addendums in it or anything. You're fine. Keep moving forward. If you've got a buyer's rep in place from pre-June 24th, it's fine. If you got an old listing agreement in place pre-June 24th, it's fine. Now, come August 17th, which I'm going to suggest we do this a few days early. Let's say August 15th. That you do not have your listing under contract, or you do not have your buyer under contract, then you're going to have to either do a new listing agreement, that's 1101, a new buyer's rep, 1501. I guess you could do the short form. But in my opinion, and what I'm suggesting is you just do the amendment to representation agreement 2701 on August 15th for those that are not under contract, and you're good to go. You're fine. Now, if there's some things in that listing agreement you want to change, maybe you want to extend it out. That's a time when you say, hey, sorry, we all have all new paperwork. We have to get this filled out. And maybe that's the time you extend your listing agreement. You extend your buyer's rep because you've got new paperwork. You might as well submit it over. You could do that as well. Okay, you can use it to your advantage. No mention anywhere of compensation on the MLS. Period. End of story. Okay. You are not to, there's not going to be any form or fashion. Now, you could say in agent remarks, because I had this brought up yesterday, you could say in agent remarks, go to my website, go to my Facebook page, go to wherever, and you can see the compensation for this property, but it can't be a link. Can't put a link in there. Okay. You could tell them where to go and they'd have to type it in on their own, but you can't put a link in there. Okay. So that is acceptable. That is acceptable. I would probably suggest for more details on this property, go to my Facebook page or my website, whatever your website is, but you can't put a link in there. All right. So don't make it clickable. If they can click on it, it takes you there. You're going to get kicked out. Okay. There'll be no links anywhere. So you can advertise sign writers. I suggest many of you go out here and get sign writers made that say, buyers welcome, buyers agents welcome, or we pay buyers. It'd be hard to go out here and put 3% because you don't know if what your seller's going to, if all you get is writers that say, buyers compensation 3%, and your buyer's not willing to pay 3%, and you got a whole bunch of them you may not be using, which is an ideal world, and we wish everybody would, but we know that's not true. Or your sellers, I'm sorry, sellers are paying the 3%. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but maybe get some sort of sign writer made up that goes on your signs out front. Maybe figure out how you want to get this out here. Flyers in your houses or flyers out front on the in a flyer box that clearly states what you're paying. Because guess what? As we educate the buyers, so let's just say you sit down with your buyer and you have this conversation. Some are going to pay me 3%. Some are not going to pay me 3%. Some are going to pay. Then they're going to be looking for this. So if they're out driving around and they see a flyer in a flyer box and they pull it out and it says, you know, buyer's agent compensation 3% on it, they're gonna be like, hey, I found one where I don't have to pay you. You got to visualize where this is going to go and what this is going to look like. Okay. Now, again, no TREC form changes. TREC has not changed, will not change until maybe the end of the year at the earliest. They've got a lot of work to do, but I guarantee you, my last topic here, we will see changes. This is not done. Get ready. You're going to have plenty of changes coming. This is the beginning of them. I promise you, because they really don't know what this is going to look like. They're just trying to make the attorneys happy. That simple. Okay. All right. We reiterated that. Here we roll. We're going to talk about sellers today. We're going to work through the whole selling process. Now, folks, this is a little bit shorter. If you notice, we had 80 some pages yesterday. We only have like, I don't know, 50 today, something like that. It's not going to take as long. We will get through this in a timely manner. We didn't have any computer glitches. Woohoo! So we're rocking and rolling here. Sellers, the average homeowner moves every 7 years. That's a fact. Some areas move faster than others. Some areas a little slower. 62% of home sellers do not use the same realtor to sell that they use to buy. Anybody want to take yes and why? Because you guys don't do a good job following back up with your buyers. And when they go to sell, they can't remember. That is an NAR statistic. And the reason they don't use the same person is they can't remember who it was that they bought the house with. Shame on us as realtors. Okay. That's good for new realtors, because they're like, wait, all these houses are going to get sold. I got a good chance of getting out here. 60% chance of getting that, even though another realtor sold it in that house, I got a 60% chance of taking that and making it mine. And that's where marketing comes in. Some of you did a really good job of tagging on Facebook and posting these boot camp yesterday. I saw a lot of activity off that. Fabulous job marketing. I know this isn't a marketing class. That's a whole other boot camp I teach, but marketing is the key to this, so that your people, that your buyers don't turn around and sell and don't use you. We've all had it happen. Every agent that's been in this business for 7 to 10 years or more has had it happen. And it's so frustrating. You drive by a house that you sold it. You're like, oh, there's a for sale sign and that's not mine. And you only have yourself to blame because you didn't follow up. You didn't do your marketing. You didn't keep in touch with them. So somebody else did a better job and they took it. You only have yourself to blame for that. You're only yourself. All right. Now, misunderstanding of the process is the number one complaint amongst home sellers. We do an amazing job with first-time home buyers. There's classes, there's special programs. We do a great job, first-time home buyers. What does a first-time home buyer become? A first-time home seller. Think about that. They've never sold before. And we do a very poor job of walking them through that process because they have no idea. Also, if they moved here, because again, we're a transient state, a lot of people come here. If you sell a house in New Jersey and you move here and then you're going to sell here, it is totally different process. So make sure that you're doing a good job of walking them through this and explaining it. Okay. I talked about this yesterday. I put this form in here again. Okay. This is a referral form. You may get a seller via referral. There's a lot of referrals go on, especially at JLA. So when you get a referral, this is a great way to document that. Start using this form. I'm not going into it. I just wanted to place it here so you knew there is a form for that when somebody's referring you or you're referring somebody out. Use this form. It's a great form. So we've got somebody that's reached out to you. We got a seller that's reached out to you. You've been doing your marketing. It's fabulous. You've got a seller that wants you to come discuss selling their house. First and foremost, I put it in red. Fully explain the value of paying a buyer's agent. However, make sure they understand it's negotiable. So the future, and you guys all have to remember, I don't know if there's anyone on this call that can raise their hand and say, I only work with sellers. We don't have that. Most people work with both. because your seller usually sells and needs to buy something. And you want to get both sides of that deal. So remember, when you're listing, you're going to turn right around and be the buyer's agent for this person a lot of the times, right? So you got to always remember you're putting on your listing hat, but you've also got your buyer's hat sitting in the car seat next to you. And the key to this whole thing working is that we as listing agents do a very, very good job explaining the value of paying a buyer's agent. Okay. And I'm just going to talk about that right now. We're just going to have that conversation. Well, John, what does that look like? Well, couple key points I want you to remember and really do a good job of expressing to your sellers. Number one of my big hot buttons is this. Hey, when you bought this house, you didn't pay a realtor to represent you. The seller that sold this house to you paid your realtor. That's how you got in it. Would you have been able to buy this house had you had to pay me that money? Number one. Number two, we got to look at market. We got to look at the market, and we got to look at your competition. If there's 5 houses in this area, generally priced the same, generally have the same condition, they're all the same age, maybe have the same stuff, and they're paying the buyer's agent and you're not, who do you think has a market disadvantage? You do. Why? Because that buyer's looking at it and saying, wow, I can buy this house and I've got X amount of dollars coming out of my pocket, or I can buy this house and I got to spend more money. Because it comes down to money mechanics here. And we're all the human beings. So they don't want to have to do that, right? If I'm looking at 2 houses, that can come into play, especially when you start to get into that. I mean, think about $500,000, right? That's $15,000 extra dollars. That's a significant amount of money. So theoretically, if we have 2 houses priced the same, we have 2 houses at $500,000. This one's paying the agent, the buyer's agent. This one isn't. This one's $15,000 higher. The one that isn't paying the buyer's agent, even though they're the same amount of money on paper, it's $15,000 higher in the eyes of the buyer. You have to explain this to the seller. Okay. The other big piece here is especially in the greater Houston market, I think most major city markets, new construction is every resale's major competition. And let me tell you, the builders are going to keep paying. They're going to keep paying. So your major competition is this person. Let's use the $500,000 again. You got $500,000. We're going to list your resale house at $500,000, or they can go over here and buy a brand new house for $500,000. Well, now I get a brand new house for $500,000 versus your used one. And it's $15,000 cheaper than your house because you're not paying my buyer's agent. The builder is. Wow, this becomes a real no-brainer. Put it back on them. What would you do? How would you see that if you're the buyer? And remember, we're going to take you out. Now, I'm going to take you out and show you houses after this. You're going to pay one way or the other. You can't not pay a buyer's agent and expect the seller to pay when I take you out to look at houses. There's another big piece of this. And for engineers, you can probably have this conversation with them. Certain people you can. It's already built into the price of your house. Now, some people like to argue with me on this, and this is a John opinion. When they bought their house, whatever they paid for it was built into the price. It's still built into the price. All the comps around you that sold in the last 6 months is built into the price. It's built in. And technically, you're not paying it. The buyer's the one bringing the mortgage to pay that. You're giving them, the buyer's agent, that money back from the buyer. My personal opinion. A lot of people like to argue that one with me. So listing agents, your job is crucial. It's still negotiable. You can't make them. But I can tell you what's going to happen. They're going to go out here and be like, nope, I watched the news. I don't need to pay a buyer's agent. Don't have to anymore. And like, you never had to. It was never a law that you pay the buyer's agent. It's always been negotiable. Always has been and always will be. But you're okay. You don't want to pay them. I'll put 0 out there every time somebody reaches out. I'm going to put, and you need to explain to them the legal steering. And you can say, as a buyer's agent, I ask my buyers, what do you want me to show them? Houses where you have to pay me, houses where the seller's going to pay me. And they're always going to pick most of the time, houses the seller pays you. So now they're going to legally steer them away from you. I'm just telling you that's what's going to happen. Because I'm doing it out here. I have these conversations with my buyers. They don't want to look at houses, but we will list your house. So you're going to put houses out there. I guarantee you we're all going to have to deal with it. You're going to have houses out there with zero compensation. The buyer's agent, they're going to sit. They're going to sit and they're going to sit. And those get to be conversations like, well, you're not paying a buyer's agent, so nobody's bringing you buyers. Sorry. You're going to have those conversations. So used to, I would say there's only 3 things that control the sale of a house. Location, you can't change that. Condition, you maybe can change it. Depends on where you are and what you need to do and how much money you have. So price, location, condition, and price. And I'm going to throw a 4th one in there, which is still part of price. It's like 4.5. And that's buyer's compensation, buyer's agent compensation. Because if you're not paying, I guarantee you there's agents will not bring you to the house because the buyer's telling them not to. Buyer's telling not to. It's legal steering because the buyers can tell you. Now, you're not going to hear that statement from anybody anywhere on HAR, TAR, any of these watch, because they want to steer really clear of it. They don't want to state the obvious. I'm going to state the obvious. If my buyer says, I don't have the money to pay you, I don't want to pay you, so don't show me those houses, we're going to not show them. Steering. You told me to. I'd get it in writing, buyer's agents. Gonna happen. All right. So you're at your listing appointment. You need to do a market analysis. Not only do you need to do a market analysis, you need to have your seller sign off on that. It states, hey, I showed you what I think the house is worth. Now, when you go there, 99 times out of 100, the seller has a price in their head. You pray that the price in their head is similar to your market analysis. You pray. I can tell you right now, it's not the case because some of them still have 2021 memory. They think that their house is going to sell in 6 hours, $30,000 over what it's worth, because their neighbor's house did that in 2021. And it's kind of tough out here right now. I'm not going to lie. Like, having tough conversations with sellers about, no, here's what the market says your house is worth. You want $50,000 more, $75,000 more. So you're going to take a market analysis. You're going to present that to them. And you're going to have those discussions around pricing. I've listed houses in the past that I knew were $50,000, $60,000 overpriced. We've all done it. And there's nothing wrong with that. A sign in the yard sometimes is really nice to have, right? But you got to have a conversation. We got to be honest with them up front and say, I will list your house for that. Just know if we're not getting any activity, we're not getting any showings, that's the reason why. Because I'm going to get the exposure on. And if you set that expectation up front, then when the time comes, and then sometimes you're going to be proven wrong. I remember it's probably been 2 or 3 years ago. Tony Moss, I know, was on this call. Tony Moss brought this. She had a unicorn out in the commons, and for the life of us, we couldn't figure out how in the world we were going to get this thing sold at the price they wanted. And I looked at it. She looked at it. We couldn't figure it. Darned if she didn't get a full price offer. We all looked stupid. So sometimes it happens, right? Sometimes it doesn't make any sense. Sometimes it happens, but the more of that expectation you set up front on your listing appointments, the easier those conversations are to have. Now, many of you got your license from COVID on, and if you were doing real estate during COVID for that 2021, even into 2022, it didn't matter what you priced a house, had it sold. Those days are gone. So you got to get real comfortable having these conversations, doing a solid CMA, and really talking them through. Now, I like RPR. Some people don't. Your MLS has, by the way, if you don't know what RPR is, you're all paying for it. It's through the National Association of Realtors. It's NARRPR.com. It's free to you because you're already paying for it. I love it for running serious market analysis. So if you've never looked at that, I suggest it. But the MLS all has some sort of market analysis platform built in that you can use. Ask a ton of questions. Tell me what you like most about your house. Tell me what you like least about your house. What would you like to list the house for? Now you're going to get 1 of 2 answers. That's why I brought you here, for you to tell me that, or they're going to tell you exactly down to the penny what they want to list the house for. They've got a number in their head. Just remember, they've always got a number in their head. What are you going to do after we sell the home? I think this is probably a question that everybody should be asking, and very few people are. And I'm going to tell you why this is important to me. Most people are going to say, well, I'm going to sell this house. I'm going to buy another one. Okay. Well, there's twofold here. One, I want to be your buyer's agent when you go to buy. So you're trying to get an angle on that. The other thing is this, when they say that, then you need to come back with this statement. Hey, I want to go ahead and get you over to my lender and go ahead and get that process started, because we're going to sell your house fast and we're going to have to be ready to buy, because you're going to want to move out of this one and a new one. You're doing this for two reasons. One, yeah, you want to get them psyched up about buying, but you need to make sure that they can still qualify. Okay. Every year we make 4 to 5 homeowners renters. We get their house listed. We get it under contract. We start looking at houses and realize when we get to the lender that there's something in their credit that keeps them from buying. Folks, if you miss a car payment today, your credit score is going to drop between 60 and 75 points, just like that. If you are pissed off at Verizon and you switched cell phone carriers and you move over to AT&T and you're not going to pay Verizon and that thing goes to collection, can drop you another 50, 60, 70 points. Okay. 3 late payments in a row. To say they're going through 3 late payments in a row is the same credit score hit as a bankruptcy. Get your hands around that. If you go 90 days late on a car payment, a house payment, you're not buying a house for at least 2 years. So you've got to get people, and that's not a conversation you want to have with this seller. Is like, hey, I'm going to check and make sure you don't have shitty credit. That's not it. You're going to get them over the lender. But if you're deep into the process and you got the listing agreement going and you're going to take this thing live and your seller calls you and is like, nope, we're not selling. We've decided to stay here. It's because the lender told them you can't buy a house. But if you get them under contract before you do this and they're like, well, we can't buy. Well, you can't get out. We're going to talk about that today. Once they sign that 1 to 4 contract and the buyer drops off their earnest money, the seller can't back out. So now they find they can't buy, but now they're forced to sell because they're under contract. They got to become a renter. Don't do this to people. Make sure you get them to the lender. Make sure you get them over there and get them started. Before you get this thing under contract, I want them working with the buyer or with the lender to become the buyer. All right. What do you owe on the home? Let me just tell you, everybody knows what they owe on their home roughly. If they tell you, I don't know, they're lying to you. Okay. This is important because you don't want to list that. I'm going to give you a good example of this and something to be very cautious of. And we're seeing it a lot. During COVID, they had the COVID relief program where you didn't have to pay your mortgage for 6 months, 9 months, whatever it was. And a lot of people took advantage of that. And a lot of price points. It isn't just certain price points. A lot of people took advantage of it. Here's what happens. You need to ask that question. Write this down. It's not on here, but you need to ask it. Did you take the COVID relief on your mortgage during the pandemic? If they say yes, then you need them to call their bank and find out what their total payoff is. Because they think that money was free and it's not free. What they did is they take those payments and they put them on the back end of the mortgage. And their bank statement or their payment statement that they get every month. Now, a lot of times people just have this on auto, so they don't even see the statement. But their statement isn't accurate. If they pull up their statement, it is not accurate. Okay? It says they owe $340. It's an example. They owe $340. That's what their statement says. And in reality, they owe $370 because it's between 35. Everybody I've seen is between $35,000 and $50,000 difference between what they think they owe and what they actually owe. And they don't find that out till the CD comes out from the title company, and the title company ordered the payoff, and the payoff now has that COVID relief money on the full amount. And I've seen it happen a lot. And I've seen deals fall apart. They thought they had $40,000 equity. They were selling their house. They were going to walk away with $40,000. Come to find out they've got $0 in equity because they didn't factor in the COVID relief. And I've had more than one say, well, I thought that was free money. It ain't nothing free. You just didn't have to pay it. It got put on the back end. Ask those questions. You can derail a transaction so fast. Okay. We've done our listing appointment. We're giving them a CMA. We've talked through what they owe. If they've got COVID relief, we've got all this. And they're like, we're ready to roll. Now, during that listing appointment, you need to get this IABS signed. While you're there, you're having a substantial conversation. You need to get this signed. Now, my favorite thing to do with paperwork is just blame me. Always blame me. Hey, my broker makes me get that. I know it's dumb, but we got to do this. My broker makes this how I get paid. Always say, if I want to get paid, I have to get you to sign this stuff, right? Super easy. As it's the same as yesterday, the brokerage goes on the top. Your broker of record goes second. Your manager or myself can go third, and fourth is you. Get this signed, folks. Get this signed. It's not even a discussion piece. We talked about it in depth yesterday. We're going to talk about it in depth today. All right. Just like I told you yesterday, the buyer's rep is mandatory now. Okay. And I think buyer's rep was a little bit of a gray area for some people. They got it signed eventually because you have to have it to get paid, JLA. But yeah, I know I was an agent. I know how this works. Sometimes you got it signed up front. Sometimes you got it signed in the middle. And I know some of you got a buyer's rep signed 2 days before closing because you need it for your paperwork. I'm not an idiot. Buyer's rep has to be signed before you walk across the threshold of a house. Same thing with the listing agreement. Must be signed before you put a sign in the yard, before you market that property. You cannot be doing that without a buyer's rep in place. So we're going to walk through, or without a listing agreement in place. We're going to walk through the listing agreement right now. There are some changes here. Now, I do not have the lease listing agreement in here. I do not have the farm and ranch listing agreement in here. Those changed as well. They're the same. We don't need to go over them. The same changes that are here that we're going to talk about, the same changes in farm and ranch is a little bit different. Farm and ranch just talks about who gets paid what, and it's agreed on up front. Okay. Commercial's done this way too. So what we're trying to do here, and I should have probably talked about this yesterday a little bit more, but what they're moving residential to is what's already been going on in farm and ranch and what's already been going on in commercial on a high level. In commercial, there's no, the commission isn't listed anywhere. You call the listing agent and be like, what are you paying? And then they go from there. We're going to be doing the same thing. This is not new. Sometimes they don't pay. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they pay a lot. Sometimes they pay a little. It's always negotiable. And a lot of times you're going to have people say, well, it depends on the offer. You're going to get that a lot. I know you're going to get that a lot. Hey, are you paying a buyer's commission? Depends on the offer. Okay. Here we go. So let's walk through the listing agreement. Sellers, that's your seller at the top. Broker, that's us. Okay. Again, I don't need fax numbers, folks. You don't have to get super crazy on this, but we do need this information in case we need to reach them. If you're incapacitated and we have to find a way to get a hold of your people, this is how we do it. All right. Property, lot, block. Now I'm going to stop you here on seller. If you go to the tax records and you're looking up the lot and the block and the address, and the seller on the tax records doesn't match the seller you've been talking to, you better have some red flags going. There are a ton of scams out here where people are representing themselves as owners of properties and they want to sell it. And they're calling agents saying, hey, I want to sell this property. I need to sell it fast. I want to unload it. Now, that's typically land, but it could be vacant property as well that's paid off because they're trying to impersonate the seller. So you need to be very cautious. I'm going to take this so far as to say this. And a lot of you have heard this because you get on my Monday calls, you get on my Thursday calls, but there's some people on here that don't do that. I don't know why they don't, but they seem to not have the time. If you get a call from somebody to sell a property and you don't know how they got your information and they can't tell you how they got their information, you better be doing a ton of digging. Because I'm going to tell you that none of us, I'm not even going to say none of you, I'm going to say none of us are so good at marketing that somebody living in Dubai reaches out to us and says, oh, I found you on social media and I think you're the best realtor. Your marketing isn't that good. If it's a total stranger and they can't tell you how they got your information or why they're using you, huge red flags. Massive red flags. Same thing if they only want to email, they don't want to at least FaceTime. If you can't get them to FaceTime with you, they only want to email, red flag. If they want to sell a property well below market value because they need to move it fast, red flag. Red flag. Okay, let's not get so excited about a stranger calling us to list their property without thinking, why is that stranger calling me to list their property? Why me? Why did I get picked? What does that look like? right? Sidetrack there. So seller needs to match who's in the needs to match who's in the deed, right? Who's paying the taxes, please. So there's your property. You're going to put that in. Let's go down here to exclusions. You need to do the same thing to your seller and say, listen, let's talk about exclusions. If I were to take your house and I were to turn it upside down and shake it, everything that falls, you can take with you. If it doesn't fall, it has to stay in the house. Is there anything that wouldn't fall that you want to take with you? Yeah, I want to take, my grandmother's chandelier in the entryway. We're taking that. Okay, then we need to exclude that. But let me tell you, listing agents, save all of us a lot of grief and tell them to go ahead and remove anything that they are planning to take with them. Take grandma's chandelier down and put a different one up. Put it in storage and you can take it with you. And they're going to say, well, it's going to help with showings. Yeah, but they're going to want it. And then we got to fight over it. So just for the most part, a lot of these exclusions, I mean, I get it if they want to exclude certain things like, I want to take my curtain rods with me. Those certain things you're not going to take down ahead of time. But if it's something that is going to cause an argument or a fight over it, then let's go ahead and just take it now. Let's get rid of it, get it out of sight, out of mind, because people want what they're told they can't have, and you'll be fighting over framed mirrors in guest bathrooms. I get so tired of fighting over that. They're $17 at Home Goods. Go get another one. Like, stop fighting over that stuff. But if it's going to be excluded, it needs in here, and then you got to make sure to take these exclusions off D and put them on the MLS so the buyers know. And then you got to make sure when the 1 to 4 comes in that those exclusions are listed there, or we're going to have a problem on our hands. Okay. I don't know how many times I've had agents say, I forgot to check the 1 to 4. I mean, we meant to exclude them. Well, you didn't exclude them on the 1 to 4. So where are they? Just be aware of that. Okay. Is it an HOA? That's E. Yes or no? It is or is not. It's pretty simple. They know if they're paying HOA. Listing price, back to our CMA, back to where they want to be. This is a discussion that you're going to have with them and fill this number in, right? It is that simple. And it's great when your CMA and their expected price in their head is similar or close. But unfortunately, a lot of times it's not. So you have to have those conversations. You're the expert. Act like the expert. Show them the proof. Even then, some people won't believe you and they don't care. Emotions drive the price of homes up. They think their house is worth, I mean, this is where I raise my babies. I mean, it's worth so much to me. Well, it's not. That's not what other people see. Okay. Term, listing begins on and ends on. I'm a big fan of 6 months here. Okay. I think a lot of times I see people try to put a year in here. I'm sorry, if you're not selling their house in a year, we got bigger issues, probably not going to sell. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't put it in there, but I like 6 months. All right. Broker's compensation. Here we go. Again, as we discussed yesterday, red is going away. Blue is the new terminology that they put in. This is where I love this change. If you'll remember the listing agreement before, they talked about the total commission for they were going to pay the listing agent. And then like several paragraphs down, you're talking about what you're paying the buyer's agent. And it was always confusing because you couldn't talk about them together. It's all together now. Okay. So the first bold right there says broker's compensation or the sharing of compensation between brokers is not set by law nor fixed, controlled, recommended, or suggested by the Association of Realtors. There you go. Brokers independently determine their fees. So A, you got two very, very easy boxes here. This is not complicated. A is paragraph A includes payment of compensation to the other broker, says it right there. With compensation for other broker. If they're going to be paying the buyer's agent, then you're going to use A. Okay. And it's when earned and payable, seller pay the broker, and you can insert a percentage, like 3%. We're going to pay the buyer, we're going to pay the buyers now. Okay. 1 is the total amount. 2 is what you're paying to the other side. So let's make sure we understand that. If you, whatever you put in box A or B, you could type, and I'll explain B to you in a minute. So if you're like, yeah, I'm going to list this house for 6%, I'm going to pay the buyer's agent 3, and I'm going to keep 3, then you're going to put 6% on A. You're going to check A and put 6%. Okay. Because then you're going to go down to 2, and it says from the amount stated in 5A1, Broker will pay the other broker the following fees if the other broker procures a buyer to purchase the property. So if the other broker represents the buyer, 3%. Right there. That's standard, just like we've always had in all of our other listing agreements. They just weren't together and they weren't this easy to explain. I think this makes it easier. Hey, you know what? It's negotiable. I like to pay a buyer's agent for all the reasons we discussed to start this. And I would always lead with 6%, 3 for the buyer's agent, 3 for me. Now, if they say, hey, I'm only going to pay 5, then you need to tell them what this is going to look like right here. Okay, well, then I'm going to split that 2.5, 2.5. Okay. That's simple. So in a case of, oh, I'm only paying 4.5%. Let's just use that. I'm only going to pay 4.5%. You're going to get somebody who does this. Then you're going to go to check box 1A, put 4.5 in there. And then you're going to have to decide right there in front of them, what are you paying the other side? Are you paying them 3% and you're only keeping 1.5? You paying them 2%, you're keeping 2.5? It's all negotiable. Okay. But they need to know and they need to agree to it. So A is if they're willing to pay, 5A is if they're willing to pay the buyer's agent. Now, why do we have B there? A1B. Let's say you're working a deal and we've done this. I know you've all done this. So you're like, hey, if I sell your house, it's 6%. But if you let me represent you as the buyer on your new home, I'll list your house for 5% or 4%, whatever you're negotiating. That's up to you. I leave that up to you at JLA. So you're like, that's where you would put that. You would check B and say 5% if I represent you on the purchase of your new home. Or whatever. You could have any type, that's if you're doing something different than just putting a standard 3% in there or a standard dollar amount, then that's where it would go in B. Okay. There it is. This is not complicated, folks, because then B, 5B, broker fees without compensation to the broker, this is what I'm paying you. So if they say we're not paying a buyer's agent, then what goes in 5B1A is the amount that you're going to make to list the property. 3%, 2%, that's what you're going to make. And you don't have to split that money with anybody. Okay? Because they're not willing to pay the buyer's agent. So it's pretty simple. It's not that complicated. It's all right here. So when you sit down with your sellers, it's going to look something like this. I've already explained, you've explained to them why they should pay a buyer's agent. And they may say, that's great. What we're going to pay them. And I think if you go into this with confidence and strength, like, hey, what I like to do in my business is I like to list for 6%. I'm going to keep 3 and I'm going to give 3 to the buyer's agent. It's going to bring traffic and everything's going to work out great. In that scenario, you're going to put 6% in 1A, 5A1A, 6%. And then in 5A2A, you can put 3%. Just like you would in our old listing agreement. No problems. Okay. If they tell you up front, not paying a buyer's agent, then you're immediately going to go to 5B and you're going to put what money you're going to make to list that property. I know there's questions and I'm sure Amanda and Kim are fielding them over there, but this is not that complicated. Okay. It's just straightforward, just like it says here. Right now, this is an interesting seller paying buyer's expenses. In addition to paying the above broker fees, a buyer may request seller to compensate an amount toward buyer's expenses. And that's a different paragraph. And we're going to talk about that. So it says in here, hey, because that's at buyer, seller compensation, line 12 of the 1-to-4 contract, seller's compensation. We'll talk about that because they're kind of making this a new deal, and I'm going to kind of play through some scenarios on that. But let's wait till we get to 11F. Okay. You've got the earned, you got the C and D and E, earned and payable. E3, other fees and or reimbursable expenses. I have my opinion on this, but I'm going to go ahead and put it out here. For those of you that be like, you want to put in here, if you terminate early, you owe me $500 for my pictures and all. This is where that stuff goes. I think you got to be careful with that. Not that there aren't times when the seller terminates stupidly, but if they're mad at you for some reason and they terminate, they are not going to pay you that money. All you're going to do is cause a big argument. And once in a while, they will. If their situation changes, they find out they can't buy another house. Like, hey, we don't want to sell now. We're going to stay where we are. That might be a scenario where they'd be willing to pay you for your money, but that's where that would go. E3. Protection period, 60 days. Okay. And I like this because 60 is what I typically put there. Some people put 90. Okay. That's just 60 has always been my number, but you can put 90 there. You can put 120 in there. I don't really care. But it also says on here, no later than 10 days after the listing ends. This is F2. Broker may send seller written notice specifying the names of persons whose attention was called to the property during the listing. If seller agrees to sell the property during the protection period to a person named in this notice or to a relative. I love this. Did you guys see that? So sometimes you got a buyer's like, hey, I'm gonna go around and buy this house, but I'm gonna do it in my brother's name so that they don't catch us. Even if they sell it to a relative. The person named in the notice, seller, sell broker upon the closing of the sale. So you've got 10 days to get them over that list once this expires, terminates. 10 days to get them over a list of people that looked at the house and said, if these people buy it, I get paid. Okay. G is the county. That's typically Harris, but it can be the county that your office is in. That's fine. Notice regarding public marketing. Okay. We once in a while run across people that do not want their property on the MLS. We're going to run across people that don't want a sign in their yard. And that makes it very hard to sell a house if we can't get exposure to it. But once in a while, you run into those people. This is where we talk about that. But it says here, if you will file. So A1 is broker will file this listing with one or more multiple listing services according to the following. Check only one box. Broker will file it within 5 days. That's box number 1. If they want to, if you're doing a listing agreement, but they don't want to go live for a week and a half, 2 weeks, then you're going to have to check B. Okay. And put the number of days in there. And that would be the reason. Okay. But you got to be careful because we can talk about coming soon here. You got to be careful coming soon. There's a lot of rules around that. And here's the number one rule. You can't have a property with a sign in the yard and marketing it. You can have that. The minute you show it to one person, it's got to be available to everybody. So if you have a coming soon and somebody reaches out and is like, hey, can I get a showing, even though I know you're not ready, and you say yes, that's a violation. If one person's allowed to see the house, everybody's allowed to be there. It doesn't even matter if it's in your own brokerage. If you take a client in a house, then you've got to get that thing live and active on the MLS for everyone. It's an unfair advantage. And there have been some serious issues around this in the past. Not a John rule, that's MLS rule. All right, so make sure you understand that. And we all see those people. They've had a sign in the yard coming soon for 3 dadgum months. And they're just trying to find a buy. And here's why they did this. Brokerages that were only listing there, and they only wanted to show their listings to their own buyers, and they were trying to double side both of these deals. And they were finding out that since it didn't hit the MLS, it didn't get into those situations where you have multiple offers and you didn't get into bidding wars. And the seller was the one that lost out on this. So the minute you show that property to one person, the minute you market that property on social media, the minute you put a sign in the yard, the clock starts ticking as to when you've got to get this thing loaded up on the MLS and run, right? Make sure you understand those rules. If you do not understand those rules, read it. Get on one of my trainings. We talk about this from time to time, but you need to understand it because you don't want to get a fine. I think it's like a $500 fine. So careful with that. Okay. Here's another one that for all of you investor people, the people that work with investors, investors oftentimes don't want you to list the final sales price of a property. They got a really smoking deal and they don't want anybody to know about it because they're going to put it back on the market in 3 months at $100,000 more. And they're like, hey, let's not list that final price. You can't do that. It says right here, notice regarding MLS rules. MLS rules require a broker to accurately and timely submit all information to the MLS, including the final closing of sales and sales prices. So don't let your investor talk you into putting something else in there. It's illegal. You get in trouble for it. Okay. You could check box number 262. Broker will not file this listing with the multiple listing service or other listings. Good luck selling a house. So here's the other thing you need to realize. And this is most MLSs. If you're on here and an odd rogue MLS, I can't guarantee this, but you take the major MLSs such as HAR. When we post your listing on there, okay, when you post your listing on there, it gets syndicated out. That's where Zillow gets it, homes.com gets it, realtor.com gets it, HoustonChronicle.com. It goes out to like tons of extra sites. It pulls straight from the MLS. So you want to be able to get it on the MLS to get the exposure it's looking for. If you're not on the MLS, I'm not sure how you're going to, yes, there are people driving around looking for houses, but what, 98% I think is the number of home searches start on the internet. That's why pictures are so important. We'll get to that. Okay. Listing content. They agree to the listing content, what we're putting out there. Also, a lot of this talks about the fact that it belongs to the broker. Those are my pictures. So when you take pictures, those belong to the picture. Those pictures belong to you because you paid for them. By the way, if you pick up a listing from somebody else, the house has previously been listed, you can't use their pictures without permission. It's a violation. Don't do that. Don't do that unless you call them and say yes. Access to the property. Okay. You're going to have access. What does that look like? Okay. Reasonable times. You're authorizing other brokers and the associates to come there. Okay. So make sure that they understand that we got to get in, right? Scheduling company. I'm going to get really, this is almost a stand on the chair or put on a wig moment, but I'm not quite there yet. Scheduling companies. If you will not be answering your phone 24/7, 365, use a showing service. HAR, if you're belong to HAR, it's free. Use a showing service. I get so tired of people calling me, I've been trying to schedule a showing with your agent for 3 days. Are you really doing your job? You want to get paid and you're not answering your phone to schedule a showing? Okay. Use a showing service. Use a showing service, please. Makes everybody's life easier. Key box. You're going to put a key box on the front door. C1 is broker is or is not allowed. Now, I understand there's some properties that, especially in the higher end range, where they don't want people accessing it without you being there. I get that. Okay. If you pick up a $2 million home, they're very likely going to say you got to accompany all showings. So you got to be there as a listing agent. I get that. Makes total sense to me. Okay. I'm going to also take this a step further. And again, big argument with people on this one. So this is John's opinion. Would you guys quit using the old school locker key boxes? Put a Supra on your listing. You know, there's a huge issue with squatters in the real estate market right now. Guess where they got in? Your key box. Somebody gave them the code. Supra boxes. Please use a Supra. I saw one the other day. $500,000 home. And it had the old school, it's full of nice things. And you got an old school key box on there. You're asking for problems. Use a Supra box. That way we know who's in there. We know when they checked in. We know when they left. And now granted, if you've got a $1,200 a month lease that's vacant and there's nothing in it, I might be okay with an old school lockbox. But even then, I've seen people break in through those and steal the stove right out of the kitchen. Don't be part of the problem. Invest in your business. Start using Supra boxes. I'm sure that made some people mad, but it is what it is. And don't tell me your phone doesn't work and you don't get cell coverage. All you got to do is do an update before you leave, and it works off of Bluetooth now. It doesn't need cell coverage. So I'm going to tell you that's a poor excuse. Don't use that anymore. You're making up excuses now. And if somebody posted that in the chat bar, I'm not calling you out. I don't even have the chat bar up. So, they removed, see, this is how far away the cooperating broker was from the original. And it was always confusing because you get back here and start talking commission again and your seller's like, huh, what? I thought I'm paying you over there. They put it all together. Freaking loved it. Now, my favorite is 8 reserved. They don't know what they're going to put there, but they didn't want to renumber everything. So they just said reserved. So they're leaving it there. Don't ask me. I laughed about it. Either they got plans for that or they just didn't want to have to renumber everything. Intermediary. Yeah, you want JLA or your broker, if you're not with JLA, you want buyers coming from our brokerage. So you're going to check intermediary status. Okay. You would want that. We talked about intermediary yesterday. Don't screw that up, please. It does talk a little bit about intermediary starting at the bottom with notices, but that's always been there. That's not new. Again, we're back to broker's authorization. Okay, we're going to reasonably effort and diligently to market the property. B, they can check again. Seller does not want this listing to be displayed on the internet anywhere, which would include your company websites or your social media. If they don't want it on the internet, don't even put it on your Facebook page because that's considered on the internet. I rarely see this. Rarely, but it could happen. Broker is authorized to market the property with the following financing options. Hey, folks, please understand what these are. Don't just go willy-nilly checking these and listing them on the MLS. If you don't have a bathroom in the house, it's not going to go FHA. So don't market it as FHA if it won't qualify. Now, there's some gray area there, but just make sure you understand these. You know, don't market owner financing if your seller does not own the house free and clear. Understand these. And make sure that you're acting accordingly with what you're marketing the property for, right? Just our rules, what we're going to be doing for sale sign in the yard. That's what D is just the stuff that we do to sell the house. It gives us permission. Okay. I love when we get up here to E. Brokers not authorized to execute any documents in the name or behalf of sellers concerning the property. Yeah, you can't side for your people. Sometimes you'll get that one's like, hey, can I make you power of attorney and you can sign my documents for me? No, I cannot. Clearly states that here. Now, F is new. Seller does or does not authorize broker to share with other brokers and prospective buyers that seller will consider contributing an amount towards buyer's expenses, such as buyer's broker fee or other closing costs. Seller is not obligated to pay any specific amount and has sole discretion to negotiate payment of buyer's expenses with the buyer under the sales contract. So this is where the seller is giving you permission to have these discussions. You now have permission. If a buyer's agent texts you and says, is your seller going to pay buyer's commission? You can respond. Now they may say, no, you can't. And that's going to be fun because you're going to have to tell everybody, I don't know. They're not telling me. I don't know. Submit your offer. I don't know. Submit your offer. Won't that be fun? There's also, I know an HAR, if you watch HAR webinar, which was not awesome. I'm sorry, HAR, I love you, but it wasn't awesome to me. There will be a new field that is basically a seller's contribution amount. So we'll talk about that form in a minute because there's a form for this for the sellers. But you will be able to, if your sellers say, yeah, I'll pay $5,000 for its closing costs, you can now list that on the MLS, that exact amount. It's not a percentage, it's an amount if you want to put that on there. There's always been a drop down that says something about the sellers will consider paying closing costs. That's always been there, but there was never an amount attached to it. Now there's going to be an amount section that you can use, you don't have to use. We'll talk about that when we get to that form, okay? Now, seller representation 12. This is where the seller is telling you whether they owe anything, like if they're delinquent on stuff. Seller's not going to tell you this. They rarely do. They're never like, yeah, I haven't paid HOA in like 4 years. They rarely say that. Don't worry about it. That's why you're going to open title to title company, and the title is going to be like, yeah, they haven't paid HOA in 4 years. Okay. Yeah, it's nice to get as much of that as you can, especially knowing up front if they're going to be really relo, or knowing up front that they've got some issues. They got a lawsuit against the property. If you know that up front, it does help, but just understand that they normally don't tell you that. Okay. K, are they well aware if they're in a MUD? Do you pay MUD? They may or may not know. You're going to have to do your research on this. If you go to the tax record, it's going to tell you why, because talk about this in the MUD. The seller is now responsible for providing the MUD documents prior to going under contract. So we'll talk about that in a short bit. That's been in effect for a year and people still don't understand it. Driving me crazy. Talks about what their rules are. I mean, I'm going through this. It says that we're going to facilitate showings and marketing. We're going to negotiate. We're going to do all these things. Okay. It tells what we can and can't do. Limited liability. We're not responsible for anything. This is a big one. Okay. We're not responsible, which is what you want. They're signing off on that. You're rarely going to put anything in special provisions, number 15. All right. Default and mediations, all legal stuff. You can read that all you want, but that's just legal stuff. Addendum and other documents. Again, like I discussed yesterday, if they put it in here, the Texas Realtors put it in here, it's probably important. Information about broker services. Love that. Seller's disclosures. You're going to get that. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Addendum for lead-based paint. If you're adding all of these, if they're in a mud, you got to check E, right? If you want to try and get the information from the HOA so you know what you're dealing with, you would check G because you're going to get requests. Mortgage information, H. I mean, there's a lot here, okay? If there's a tenant in the house, you're going to have to get a key box authorization. You can't, if there's a tenant in the house, you got to get the tenant's permission to put the lockbox on the front door. Okay. That's in seller's authorization to lease and advertise certain information. That's another form. We're going to go over that. You need to check these boxes if they apply, right? They took out 21A that we're going to, they already put that over in the front. Brokers' compensation or sharing compensation between brokers is not fixed. Yeah, we know that, but they put it up front so that it's front and center. We're back to A, B, C, D. These are fair housing. I love this one. Broker advises sellers to contact any mortgage lender or other lien holder to obtain information regarding payoff. Yeah, if they took the COVID relief, they need to do this. Don't just rely on what's in front of them on their monthly statement. That's B. I love D. Broker advises sellers to remove or secure jewelry, prescription jewelry, other values, firearms, and any weapons. It's funny we have to tell them that, but we do. Okay. E. Broker advises sellers to consult an attorney before using any type of surveillance. Yeah, well, I don't know that anybody's going to do that, but this is protection for us because everybody's being recorded. We talked about that yesterday. If it was built for 78, we're going to need the, if the property is built for 1978, this is G, sellers to provide the buyer with federally approved pamphlet on lead-based poisoning prevention. You know, we all want to make sure we're doing that. I told you about that pamphlet yesterday. It's $10,000 if the buyer doesn't get that pamphlet. Make sure you're using that, please. H. Okay. If seller is a foreign person, if you know the seller is not a legal U.S. citizen, there's a lot that goes into this because FIRPTA comes into play. And I could spend 6 hours trying to explain FIRPTA and we'd all still be lost. The title companies understand it. Just know it asks here, and most people miss this box. H has 2 boxes. Seller notifies broker that seller is or is not a foreign person. This is defined by federal law. The reason this is important is buyers need to know this because buyers could be on the hook for the seller's taxes next year in certain scenarios. So please make sure you find out if they're a foreign person. Make sure the title company knows up front. Make sure the buyers know up front so that we can work through that because FIRPTA comes into play. Not a crazy big issue. It's not. They found ways to circumvent this. There are companies that work through this for the title companies now and make sure to protect the buyer, but you don't want the buyer because it could be up to like 15% that the buyer would have to pay of the seller's taxes next year on different scenarios. And you don't want to go down that path. All right, broker's printed name, seller's printed name. Here we go. We sign it. Make sure that both, okay, not both. Make sure everybody that's on the deed signs the listing agreement. That's always fun when you're in the middle of a divorce. That's always fun when you've got, people that aren't liking each other having to sign these documents. Let's take a moment on that. I don't love divorces. I love divorce scenarios because a lot of times you just get to stand in the middle and manage this. They're going to sell the house. They got to sell the house. Now, are they messy? Yes. They're messy. Here's how you approach divorce situations, split ups, issues like that. It's a 3-way text message. We don't have one-on-one phone calls. Everything's done in writing 3 ways. Don't take a side. Stand in the middle, and you'll get these things done with minimal headache. But you need them all to agree on everything. Now, there are cases where the judge has to step in and be like, okay, you guys aren't getting along. I'm going to appoint one person to make all the decisions. If the judge gives you something in writing, Cool. You'll follow that. But don't get caught in the middle of this. But make sure that whoever's on here signs this. Because we've had scenarios where we didn't realize there's another person on the list, on the deed. And they're like, whoa, I didn't agree to sell this. And you're already under contract with somebody. And now we got a hot mess on our hands. Do your homework. Do your homework. Okay, that's the listing agreement. It's not that, most of this hasn't changed. It's just, again, we can go back and discuss. It's all right here. It's all up front. I think it's easier now than it was before. It's all right together instead of having it, 5 and 7, because before it was 5 and you had to go over to 8, 5 and 8. That's how far apart the commission conversations were when you were presenting this to a seller before. Now it's all right here. It's all under 5. You just asked, what are we doing here? I suggest we pay 6%, 3 and 3. It's negotiable, but that's what I suggest. Take that approach. And you know what's funny? I'm seeing people that have, and this is another conversation, but I think it's important here. They have written out. Jerry Blake has one. If she's willing to share it with you, sorry, Jerry, I love you long time. She's got a whole compensation thing where it says for her listings, here's what I do for 4%. Here's what I do for 5%. Here's what I do for 6%. Here's what I do for 7%. Here's what I do for 8%. Who says you only should charge 6% and pay 3 and get 3? Maybe you're worth 8%. You give 3, keep 5. If you can back it up, nobody says you can't do it. I use 6% out here because that's just easy. But there's nothing says that you can't go in here and put 8% on 5A1A and then go to 5A2 and put 5A2A and put 3%. That means you're taking home 5, but you better back that up. She gives them a list of what she's going to do with the different percentages. You check which one you want. Oh, freaking brilliant. You're putting it on them. Because if you go in and say, hey, I work for 6%, they're like, oh no, I'm only going to pay 4. Then what do you say? Well, what do you want me to take out? No, you got to give, when you go to the nail salon, you get a flyer, you sit down. What do you want? Do you want the extra scrubby stuff on your feet? That's an extra money. Do you want, it's a menu. You should probably all be doing this. Now, if you can't sit down and decide what you're worth at those places, that you don't know what maybe I get it. But I love the idea, and it's not just here. I've seen a dozen of them recently. I think it's awesome. You get to this spot, you start talking about brokers' compensation, you pull out your sheet, you be like, okay, let's talk about this. Here's what I do for 4%. Here's what I do for 5%. Here's what I do for 6, 7, and 8. I don't know how far you want to go. Maybe you stop at 8. Maybe you stop at 7. Here's all the things I do. Pick one. What do you want? You don't have to explain yourself. You've already shown them this is what I'm going to do. Sure would make that listing appointment a lot easier if they're the one picking the services they want. You don't go into the hair salon without having a clue what you want done. You don't let them just make the decision. You talk to them about it, right? Have that conversation. Have it. I probably owe Jerry lunch now. Sorry, Jerry. All right. So we did this listing agreement. Now, if you need to amend the old ones, right? We had this form the other day. We had this yesterday. You've got a pre-June 24th listing agreement. This is the only form that you need to have signed to continue moving forward with that pre-June 24th listing agreement. Now, if you want to change some terms in the listing agreement or you want to extend the listing, then do a brand new one, right? Because this just basically lets you extend the one you have. You're not even extending it. You're just updating it to meet the new requirements. Okay. So for listings, it's B, right? You can go to B and you're going to put the property address in there and then you're going to have them sign it. It's that simple. It's super easy. So this form will probably go away within the next 6-8 months because it's just only to update pre-June 24th stuff, right? Amendment to the listing. Okay. This is going to be one that you're probably going to use more than you think about. So this helps you. We just did a listing agreement. We just went through it. Everybody signed it. And now if we need to change anything, this is what that looks like. Okay. Specifically the stuff in blue is where I think, so you have let's play a scenario out. You go sit down a listing appointment. You're talking to the seller and he's like, I'm not paying a buyer's agent. And you've explained everything. You've walked them through why they should. And they're like, nope, not doing it. You're like, okay, so you went ahead and checked. You checked the section that said they're only paying you 3% and you're not paying, or whatever you negotiate, you're not paying the other side anything. And now the house is sitting and sitting and sitting. And you're reporting back. I had 7 phone calls from agents this week, but they didn't show the house because you're not paying, right? You need to log that, listing agents. If your seller's not paying buyers agents, you need to report back to them every time somebody calls you and asks you, are you paying? And you tell them no. They need to know. We had 7 people wanted to show your house. When I told them that you're not paying, they chose not to. Okay. You better be keeping a log of that, because that's ammunition. When your seller comes, you'll be like, why is my house not selling? Well, it's these 3 things. You're $40,000 overpriced and your yard looks horrible. And we've had 7 people call to want to show it, but once I told them you're not paying, they chose not to show it because they're legally steering. But now they're like, okay, fine, let's pay a buyer's agent because I got to get some activity. This is how you're going to do it. Okay. So you're going to go into C and you're going to change that. So before, let's just play scenario. Before they were going to pay you 3%, they're going to pay the buyer's agent anything. So now they're like, hey, listen, I'll pay the buyer's agent 2%. Let's put something out there. So you would go into C and you would put 5%. Okay. And then the compensation paid to the other broker would be 2%. In that scenario, they're willing to pay 2% to the buyer's agent. Then you could switch it up. You could do 2.5 to you and 2.5 to them, whatever. They're going to pay a total of 5. That's what that would look like. This is the form you're going to be doing that with. All right. You could also change the listing price. I need you guys to get away from doing things on email, because I know what you do. You're talking to the agent, the seller, and they're like, oh, let's drop the price. So you drop it 5,000 and you just use an email. You're not supposed to do it that way. There's an amendment. Start using it. Everything's got an amendment. If you're dropping the sales price, it's this amendment. It's A, you put the new one in, you get everybody's signature, you rock and roll. And there's no excuse for this, because it's too easy and too fast to digitally sign stuff. Do the paperwork. It's going to save you grief down the road. But this is how you would move from not paying a buyer's agent and then they realize they need to because the house has been sitting for 90 days with 2 showings. This is the form you're going to use. Remember that. So I told you there was a section in there where they're talking about getting authorization to advertise certain information. This is the form for that. So if they want to offer $5,000 in seller's contributions, they want to offer, if you're going to list stuff like motivated seller, okay, that's stuff you probably should get permission from, right? Because you need motivated seller, right? That's what goes here, okay? And it gives you a couple different, such as terms are negotiable, bring all offers. You need to get permission to use the terminology out there, and this is the form you do that with. Now, there's been a lot of discussion around this, and I've seen it, about seller's contributions. First, let me explain that anything that goes on line 12 of the contract, seller's contributions, that's technically money that your buyer, and I'm not talking about sellers right now, your buyer is going to pay a mortgage on for the life of their mortgage. So if they put $10,000 in there, then that's just $10,000 they're paying interest on for 30 years. Just understand that. But let's just say the buyer has plenty of money to bring to the closing table. They've got their down payment, they got everything, but they don't want to pay you your 3%. You could ask for 3% in seller's contributions, line 12, the 1 to 4. And then that's technically money that they're not going to have to bring for closing costs, and they could pay you with that. It won't be considered buyer's compensation. And the lender isn't going to market it that way, but that's a way to do it. We're going to see a lot of that. Do I like it? No. Because again, whatever's in line 12, the buyer is going to pay interest on for the next 30 years. But that's where but then you have those buyers that need all of the contributions in order to close, right? They don't have enough cash, so they need all that contributions. There's not room there because there's a limit on what you can put in that amount based on the loan that they're getting. So understand that may be a scenario sometimes, but it may not always work. You're going to have to talk to the lender and say, hey, what's that look like? But back to sellers. If you're going to be marketing a dollar amount on the MLS, they have, $5,000 seller's contributions. You got to get it in writing. You got to get permission to do that. And that's what this form's for. So this would be basically an amendment or an addendum added to your listing agreement. Let's just say we need to terminate. So you did a listing agreement. They find out they can't purchase a new home. They got some credit issues. This is what you terminate with. You get sideways with the seller. This is what you terminate with. Anytime that you're terminating, it's done with this form. Quit using email to do it, please. Please. If there are fees, then this is what it would look like. The fees specified in paragraph G2 are payable only if the owner agrees to sell or lease the property too. And if you got names here, if you've shown the house to people, you would put their names here. All right. That way you get paid. If that person pops back up and buys the house, you get paid. All right. So we got a listing agreement. We're doing the addendums, the attachments, the things that we're going to need to list this property. Let's talk seller's disclosures. There are two types of seller's disclosures. There are two of them. There's the TAR or TR version, Texas Realtors version. Then there's the TREC version. Personally, I like this one here. This is the Texas Realtors version. It's more in depth. It goes into detail. I'm going to show you both. They're both in here. I like this because I feel like the more you disclose, the better. Most lawsuits between buyer and seller revolve around lack of disclosure, failure to disclose. And I think the more boxes you have to fill in, the better. Now let's dive into this for a second. I prefer this one. They can choose whichever one they want. You're not touching this. You're not giving any advice. You're going to tell them, fill this thing out to the best of your knowledge. You could go ahead and say though, but don't leave anything out because your neighbors are going to tell on you anyway. That's what happens. True story. We had the buyers closed on the house in the morning. U-Haul's at their house unloading at like 3 p.m. Neighbor comes over like, hey, new neighbor. Like, hey, did they fix that shower issue before you closed? And you're like, they're like, what are you talking about? They're like, oh, if you clogged the drain in the shower, water would shoot out the side of the house. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, no, go do it. So the new buyer goes in, has his wife turn on the shower, puts a cup over the drain, and water starts coming out the side of the house. They won that lawsuit. Neighbor ratted them right out. Okay. Neighbors are going to tell. So have your sellers disclose everything. Tell them, just disclose. People will read this and be like, oh, well, I can deal with that. Going in, they're not mad. When they find out later that you didn't disclose it, that's when they're mad, and that's when lawsuits happen. Okay. Now, let me make this very clear. There's only a few situations where you don't have to do this form. Foreclosures don't have to do it. Airships don't have to do it. But even then, if you're listing your grandmother's house and you know what's wrong with it because you've been there and you've talked to her about it, just disclose that. Don't hide behind that. Disclose. I'll tell you who else is not immune to this. Somebody's trying to play music in my party. I'll tell you who else is not immune to this. Investors. Well, I've never lived there. So I love it what investors do. They check seller is not occupying the property and has never lived there. And then they go down through here and they check unknown on everything. Well, now you're just setting yourself up for a lawsuit because you patched the roof, you fixed this water damage, you have knowledge, you paid to have it fixed. Do not let your investor sellers cut this short because they're just opening themselves up for litigation. Now, this is the long form. I prefer it. You can't force your seller to use it, but there is one specific section that I always like to go over because it seems like people can't read. And it's right here, section 9. Within the last 4 years, have you, the seller, received any written inspection reports from persons who regularly provide inspections and who are either licensed as inspectors or otherwise permitted by law to perform inspections? Yes or no? It's not a complicated question. But if they say yes, it says, if yes, attach copies and complete the following. Attach copies. So here's what happens. They have the seller's disclosure filled out. You go under contract. Buyer performs an inspection. Sends the inspection over and we start to argue about it. And it doesn't get resolved. So the deal busts out. Now you're going to have to update this. And you're going to have to give that inspection report. Because now you have new knowledge. It's not that complicated. Now, if the seller doesn't agree with it, like, oh, that inspector was awful, I don't agree, they can get another one, pay for another one, and trump it. I don't care. Put them both in there. I'm also not a big fan of all these agents to be like, do not send me the inspection report. I don't want to see it. What are you trying to hide? Probably a chair moment, but it's too long to stand on a chair and talk about this. If you've got to go stand in front of a judge, you always got to play worst case scenario. If I got to go stand in front of the judge and the judge says, wait a second, you told them you didn't want that information so that you didn't have to share it so that you could hide from it. What do you think the judge is going to do to you? Careful listing agents. You can put yourself in a really tough spot in front of a judge. Don't send it to me. Don't put it there. I don't want to know that. Careful. Now, get this filled out. This is the Texas Realtors version. This is the Trek version. Do you see how little it is, I guess? And you don't have to attach old inspection reports to this one. I just prefer the bigger one. We can't make it, but let me show you this. I want everybody to really take a strong look at starting to use Seller Shield. Seller Shield, you send this over to your seller and they pick which form they want to use and they fill it out. And Seller Shield does an amazing job of walking them through this. There's protection here. They don't let them leave things blank. They've got some explanation stuff in there. So I'm going to suggest that you as listing agents start using Seller Shield. It's easy to sign up for. Doesn't cost you anything. I don't think it costs anything. They want our business. So I know Amanda uses it all the time. So she's in the chat bar. But start using this. Just start making it standard practice. And then it's off your hands. Just make sure they do it. Okay, so you would sign up your people through Seller Shield. They would get there. You just need to remind them, hey, I need that seller's disclosure filled out through Seller Shield. All right. Makes it super easy. Now, if you needed to update this because you got a new inspection report, this is how you update. This is the Texas Realtors update. There's no update for the Trek version. But if you want to update the Texas Realtors version, you don't need to redo a whole new one because you got a new inspection report. You just need to update those things that have been notified in the inspection report, and this is how you do it. It's super easy. Okay. There's only one time. Once you sign the contract, once you sign the 1 to 4 and it's executed, there's only one way for a seller to get out. And it's not even that they get to choose. if it happens. If the buyer does not deliver the earnest money within 3 days, seller can terminate. They're like, wait, we're not going to stay under contract if you're not going to pony up your money. So it's day 3. Buyer hasn't delivered the earnest money to the title company by 5 o'clock. By 5 o'clock on day 3, the seller can terminate if the earnest money is not there. The only way they can terminate. Okay. So you're watching this, you're talking to the title company like, hey, is the buyer, they haven't dropped off the earnest money yet? Now they may not, they don't have to. They can say, oh, we'll wait a few days. The seller doesn't have to. But if they wanted to terminate, they can use this form as long as it's after 5 o'clock on the 3rd day and before the earnest money is delivered. So if it's day 5, earnest money gets delivered at 8 o'clock, you can't send this form over at 10 and terminate. It's already there. So this form has to be, if you want to terminate, if you want to, you don't have to. If you want to, it has to be after 5 o'clock on the 3rd day, but before the earnest money is delivered. Kind of confusing, but that you can. I love this because in the past, we were stuck in a contract. Like, they've not even put any money up and you couldn't get out. Now you can. Okay. Notice only the seller signs. I advise you to send this to the title company first, then send a copy to the buyer's agent. If you send it to the buyer first, they're going to try and get something over to the title company ahead of you, but there it is. A good listing agent, once they get the listing agreement signed, they get the seller's disclosure, which we just went over. They get that signed. We're going to load that up into the document section of the MLS. Then we're going to get a survey. You're going to ask your seller, do you have a survey? Now, for all of my engineering friends, they have 37 surveys. They got them laminated. They got them on CD. They got one framed in their office. They have every. For the rest of us normal people, we know we have one. We don't know where, right? If you can get it, you want this because you're going to need this. It makes things real easy because when the 1 to 4 gets written and they ask, do you have a survey? They check box 1. They've got 3 days to get this over. Okay. So a good listing agent gets the survey and the T47. And they have that available for the 1 to 4 when it comes in. Now they're going to get this T47 and it must be notarized. Hold that. You have to get the T47 notarized as part of this process, or you are in violation of box 1 on, this is the 1 to 4. I pulled this, I brought this down. This is not in your packet. I put this in today. You're in violation here because it says you must provide, if the buyer's agent checks box 1 and puts 3 days on the survey on the 1 to 4, it says you must provide the survey and the T47 to the title company and the buyer within that 3 days. That does not mean a blank T47. That means a completed T47. So you need to get this up front. You need to get this done early as part of your listing agreement and quit arguing with me that we'll get it done at the closing. We'll get it notarized at the closing table. No, because what happens there is it clearly says if the seller fails to do this, that the seller is responsible for buying a new survey. And that means a T47. That doesn't mean just providing a survey. That's a T47. I see people, they send over the T47. They send over the T47 or they send over the survey. The T47 is just signed. It's not notarized. It's not complete. And by the letter of the contract, I can then tell the title company, order me a new survey. Seller has to pay for it. And the listing agent, guess what, listing agents? You know who has to pay for that when you don't do your job? You do. Because if you go to your seller and say, yeah, I forgot to get him the survey in time, so you got to buy a new one, they're going to lose their mind. New surveys, roughly $500 in a master plan community. Once you get outside of a master plan community, you start getting acreage involved. Oh, they can go into the thousands very, very fast. So a good listing agent gets the survey, T47, send them over to the title company and have it notarized. Send them to the bank and get it notarized. Oh, by the way, you are not allowed to notarize your own legal documents in a transaction. And as a matter of fact, I don't want another JLA agent notarizing your legal documents in a transaction. Do not do that. I know a lot of you have your notary. I don't want you, I don't, we're starting to blur lines here. Do not do that. Hope I made myself clear on this one. I've argued with like 5 people in the last 2 weeks on this. We can just get it notarized at the closing table. No, you're not following the contract at this point. So, good listing agents, we've uploaded the seller's disclosure. We put our listing online. We've uploaded the seller's disclosure into documents. We've uploaded the survey in. We've uploaded the T-47. Okay, we've got all these done. I'm going the wrong way. All right. We also need to upload the MUD form. Now, this is, I'm going to pull this out eventually, but so many people are still messing this up. The old MUD form's gone. It's been gone for a year. Now, you as the listing agent have to get the MUD documents from the MUD. You can normally go to their website and pull it off. Most MUDs have finally gotten there. And you pull off the MUD disclosure and you have your seller sign it and you make it part of your package. Because here's the deal. Here's what you don't realize. If you listing agents do not provide the MUD prior to going under contract, then the buyer can cancel the contract at any point along the way up until 3 days before closing. Think about that. If you're not providing that MUD document to the buyer before you go under contract, you've left it open for the buyer to cancel for that reason all the way to the closing table. They get mad about something else, like, oh, we're going to cancel because we didn't get the MUD. And there's not a darn thing you can do about it. So you got to get a hold of the MUD up front. Website's normally there. And get their MUD disclosure and get it signed. Just get it loaded up into documents. Now, I will take this a step further. I'm going to take this a step further. Just because, we're going back up here. Just because you've loaded this into the document section does not constitute delivery to the buyer's agent. When you get ready to go under contract, you need to send them all of this via email, because having it available does not constitute delivery. It says delivery, not having it available. So you're going to have to email this as well, because right here it says delivery 1 to 4. You got 3 days to deliver it. So then you're going to email them these 2 forms so that you can prove delivery. You can say, well, it was loaded up on the MLS. That doesn't mean they saw it. All right. Doesn't mean they saw it. MUD changes. Get this right. Don't give the buyers a reason to cancel. All right. This is a notice that you're rarely going to use this, but if you're having trouble, and this is just disclosing something to do with a special taxing authority or assessment district, it's rare. It's not for use with PIDs. It says right here, not for use with PIDs, but you could use this if there's if you can't get the documents from the MUD, but you have the data, you could use this, listing agents, get it filled out and get it over. Okay. It's a lot more of a pain in the butt than just getting it straight from the MUD. All right. Lead-based paint. You're going to have your sellers fill this out. The house is 1978 or below. You're going to have them fill this out. And again, I want a good listing agent gets this filled out and is already sitting in the document section. It's already done. You're not doing it after the fact. But let's just say we need to terminate. Okay. This is a termination of listing between the undersigned parties concerning the property located at. Okay. It's a termination of the listing. Let's say this is how you do it. Okay. Presentation disclosures. So this is a funky one. You could use this in a lot of different ways. I put it here because this is where I feel like the scenario is going to come into play. You got your house listed. You're the listing agent. And somebody calls you off the sign and says, hey, I want to look at your property and I'm not represented. Well, we've already learned that if you're showing somebody a property as a buyer's agent, you've got to get a buyer's rep signed. You could use this to disclose to them that you only represent the seller. Do I see a lot of people using this? Probably not. It's obvious my name's on the sign, I'm representing the seller. But if there's any doubt, because everybody's worried about buyers going directly to the listing agent to do deals. But I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of brokerages don't allow that. There's a lot of brokerages E&O that don't want any part of that because it's a hit on your E&O, by the way. So they may need to disclose up front, I don't represent you. Now, they could be unrepresented. I think what you're going to see more of than anything is buyers coming directly to the listing agent and saying, all right, I want to put an offer in, but I'm not going to be represented by anybody. Because if the seller has decided that they're going to pay a buyer's agent as well, then they're better off to use a buyer's agent. But if they're coming there and the seller's only going to pay 3%, seller's paying 3% to the listing agent, and the buyer comes unrepresented, he's like, well, then I'm going to go unrepresented. They could. Well, the listing agent's going to do what they have to do to get the house sold, but they're not going to put them under a buyer's rep because there's no money in it. They're only getting paid 3%. Now, are they still going to have to write the contract? Yeah. They're going to write the contract, send it over. Send me what you want to offer. I'm going to write it up. But they're not representing them. What you want to stay away from, listing agents, there's no reason to put a buyer under a buyer's rep and create an intermediary status. There's no reason for that. If they want to be unrepresented, you don't need that. Even if the seller is paying, let's use 6% to you, and you agreed to pay a buyer's agent 3%. Well, if you don't have a buyer's agent, you still get to keep that 6%. So there's no reason to create that. I know that's a big thing for agents, and you need to get away from this. Is you run out here and be like, oh, I got a buyer for my property. They're not represented. I'm going to represent both sides. Stop doing that. Let the buyer go unrepresented. Write up the paperwork. Give them the information. Let them be unrepresented. You still get the 6%. Because if there's no buyer's agent to pay, you get the full amount. Then you didn't create an intermediary. You didn't create other issues there. If that's the route you want to take. I personally will tell those people, you need to be represented. Go find yourself a buyer's agent. You really don't want to represent both sides. It's a hot mess. You can't do a good job. Somebody's going to, and lawsuits happen all the time in what I call true intermediary, where the buyer and the seller are represented by the same agent. Lawsuits happen all the time. But this is a representation disclosure. This would let that buyer know, hey, I only represent the seller. Or if you're taking a buyer to a house, you could let the landlord know that I only represent the buyer or the tenant. I don't see it be used a lot, but I wanted to show it, put it out here so everybody knows. Okay. You need to get the wire fraud signed by the seller as well. People are like, what do they do? Sometimes there's wiring going on. If they owe money that they need to wire to the title company, or if they owe back stuff that they're wiring, make sure they know, do not be wiring stuff unless we know for a fact who you're wiring to. Same deal. We're going to get everybody to sign this form. Everybody. All right. So you've got the house listed. You've got all the documents. You got the seller's disclosure. You got the survey. You got the T47. You got before 1978. You got the lead. You got all that loaded up in the documents online. Next step: super box on the front door. We already talked about super boxes. I want super boxes. Get a key that works. Who in here actually uses the front door to their house to go in and out? Okay, the 6 of you that raise your hand are weird. The rest of us go through our garage or we go through a side door. Okay. I don't have a key to my front door. I don't know where there is one. It's probably in my junk drawer. So before you leave that property and you put a super box on the front door, make sure the key works. Make sure the key works. Because if you're not, you put a key in there that says front door on it, but it doesn't go into this house, the first showing is going to lose their mind on you. So check to make sure the key works. Measure the rooms. All right. House has been listed 3 other times. You can pull the history up. Whatever you do, do not take the information from us old agents that did it the first time, because we just guessed. We would step off 1, 2, 3. Looks like 10 feet to us. Do not take our word for it. We were wrong. You need to probably, I suggest you getting one of the laser tape measures and measure all the rooms, please. Because we were wrong. Don't take our word for it. Put a sign in the yard. I love signs in the yard. As a matter of fact, when you go on a listing appointment, you better plan on it. So you got to put it out to the universe. When you go on a listing appointment, go ahead and put your sign in the yard. That way, when they agree to it, you can go ahead and put the sign out. Hire your pictures done. Folks, I know these phones take great pictures. I know. Do not do this. When somebody comes to me and says, I don't understand why my house isn't selling, and I go look at your listing and the pictures are awful, I can tell. We can all tell you took those with your cell phone. Hire it done. It's $250. I mean, you're getting ready to make $12,000, $15,000 on this property. You can invest $250 in marketing. Hire it done. List it on the MLS. Set up showing instructions so that you've got the showing service knows what those instructions are, right? Because you need to know if there's cats in the house. You need to know if there's alarm. You need to know all that. Oh, by the way, make sure the seller has a key to that side door they use between their garage and their house, because that's the door they use the most. Because on showing instructions, we always say, turn off all lights and lock all doors. And they lock that door. They don't have a key to that door either. So they can't get in. So they're calling you when they get home from work. You're like, I can't get into my house. And you got to go let them in with a super. Okay. Make sure they have a key to that door. Just FYI. Marketing. Seller wants to see activity. They want to see it on social media, but don't post it every week. But get it out there. Open houses. They make the seller feel good. You're rarely going to sell a house via open house, but it makes them feel like you're doing it. MLS activity report, one of my favorite reports. Make sure you're going. It shows you how many social media hits. So what's your job? To get exposure for their house. So that tells me, you show that, hey, listen, we had 810 hits this week. For those of you that are actively using KV Core, boy, they can, your listings get blown out there all over the place, and you can show your seller all this great data off of it. It makes you look like a superhero. Now, a lot of you don't use KV Core because you, for some reason, don't want to put the time and energy into it. And I could really get off on my soapbox on that, because the amount of leads we're getting off KV Core right now is stupid, but many of you aren't getting them because you won't sign up and go through the process. But that's for another day. Follow up weekly with their sellers. You've got to follow up and stay aware of market conditions. If you're not, sometimes I'll get sellers that call me like, hey, I'm listed my house with you guys, but I haven't heard from my agent in 3 weeks. Don't do that. Even if you have nothing else to share, call to touch base, call to go over the MLS activity report, call to talk to them. You cannot ghost these people. Offer comes in. So you've got it listed. All the documents are out. Offer comes in. You have to submit every offer to your seller, every single offer, all the way to the closing table. There's a gray area with those people that just send you emails and says, hey, I'd like to offer blah, blah, blah for your house. They've not seen it. It's not on a 1-to-4 contract. You don't have to really submit those. I would just tell your people, hey, we got this bogus email offer. I say it's bogus because it's not on a 1-to-4 contract, but they offered you 140. We're listed at 240. Do you want me to do anything with it? And the answer is always going to be no. Okay. Everything's negotiable. You must change the status in the MLS when the contract is executed. You know what? You are also going to be a buyer's agent. And we've all had this happen where you schedule a showing for tomorrow at 3:00. And you get out there and you show the house and everything is good. And your buyers love it. Like, hey, let's put in an offer. And you reach out to the listing agent like, oh, we went under contract yesterday. You wasted your time and your energy. You got your buyer excited. Don't do that. Don't be that listing agent. The minute it goes under contract, change the status in the MLS. Oh, by the way, boy, some agents like to argue with this one. I see so many agents say, oh, I can't change that until I get the earnest money and the option money. Wrong. Once the contract is executed, you have an executed contract. You do not, delivering the option money and the earnest money is a performance issue, but it does not mean you don't have a contract. You have a contract. Because technically I could write a contract that had 0 earnest money and 0 option money and still have a contract. Those are conditions and terms. They don't constitute having a contract or not having a contract. Once it goes under, because I have some people say, and this is a big one, I'm not letting you do inspections until I get the option money. You can't do that. Is it make sense? Yes, but you can't do it. He's like, well, what? I want my option money before you can. You can't keep people from doing that. Is not part of this. Sorry. I love to argue with people on this one. All right. Repairs and appraisal. Advise the sellers to not make repairs until after the third party is up. So you've got a contract, you're in the option period, you negotiated repairs, and the seller goes out and does all the repairs the next day, and then we bust out during the third party option period, and they're mad. Just tell them, let's wait to do these repairs a little closer. Let's make sure we're solid, because the next buyer is going to want a whole other set of repairs. In certain circumstances, it's good to meet the appraiser at the house. If you've got one of those houses, you're like, ooh, I don't know. Like, ooh, I don't know if it's going to appraise. Meet them there. Give them your CMA. Give them a list of all the things where it appraised. Give them that. Maybe it's all the list of things that they've upgraded, all the money they've spent. Now, here's how you do that. People are like, well, how do you do that? Take the super box off the front door. They can't get in without you. Now, if you're that person that's late to everything, if you got on this call today at 9:15 and that was just normal behavior for you. If you're late to everything, do not do this, because you're going to be late to meet the appraiser. They're going to be mad, and it's going to affect the appraisal value. So just know who you are and whether or not you should make these decisions. But you need to also set the right expectation with the sellers on appraisal. Just because we have 5 people that are willing to pay this price for this house doesn't mean the bank thinks it's worth it. And we're having some appraisal issues right now. Not going to lie. Because everybody thinks their house is worth more than it is. Set the expectation before the appraiser goes out. Start doing seller net sheets, folks. These net sheets, it's in matrix for HAR, but everybody has them. Title companies have them, lenders have them. Everybody's got net sheets. Start getting, so you got that 1-to-4 contract that came in. Submit this to your seller and say, hey, here's what, here's the net sheet. It's 2 pages. Well, I had to make 2 pages out of it to put it on here. So based on what you told me and what you owe and everything you're saying, you're going to walk away with $125,000. It's an estimate. Get good at doing these. It makes you look professional. It makes you look, and they're making qualified decisions off this. Right? Now, it's only as good as the information they gave you. They told you what the payoff was. If that's not right, that's not on you. Right? Issues and concerns. And we're on the downhill run here, folks. Stick with me. Home doesn't appraise. You got a couple options. Either party can back out if it doesn't appraise. Seller can drop the price to meet the appraisal value. Buyer can bring extra money to cover that. I don't like that scenario at all. Not in this market. Or they can split the difference somewhere. Like seller can drop the price a little and buyer can bring up some extra money. But we're back to negotiation when it doesn't appraise. Where this becomes an issue is that we put $10,000 in seller's contributions on line 12. And guess what? It appraised for $10,000 less. Well, that $10,000 wasn't going to the seller anyway. It was going to the buyer. So now we got to renegotiate, and that's going to make things funky. Buyer's financing falls through. Folks, just go with it. If they can't buy, they can't buy. Quit trying to make this work. I get so tired of people like, well, let's run them through 17 other lenders. Yeah, I understand if they're pre-qualified at Bank of America and it falls through. By the way, I don't know why anybody would try to do a loan through the big banks, but that's neither here nor there. If they're qualified somewhere like that and you want to give them a shot at your local lender, totally agree with that. But don't try 19 lenders to try and get these things done. They just don't qualify. Put the house back on the market and find another buyer. Home is damaged under contract. Okay, we've had some flooding issues. We had it's under contract. What happens? The seller has to put the house back to the condition it was when it went under contract. Buyer has to give them time to put it back, unless the damages to the home were 5% or more of the value of what we're paying for. If it's 5% or more, then the buyer can back out and get the earnest money back and the deal's dead. For instance, if the house took 3 feet of flooding and you're under contract and you know that's going to be more than 5%, the buyer can walk away, get the earnest money back, and they're done. But if a toilet overflows, which you have to disclose that, listing agents, a toilet overflows while under contract and you got to replace the carpet in a room or some, and it's 2%, 1%, then seller has to put it back, has to fix it, buyer has to give him permission, and buyer can't back out for that. Okay. Has to be 5% or more to back out. Seller situation changes. This is a tough one. Boy, this is tough. Seller loses their job while under contract. They're like, I can't sell. I can't buy anything else. Or whatever the reason is. You can go to the buyer's agent and get down on your knees and beg, please let us out of this. Agent's going to take it to the buyer. Maybe the buyer will let you. Maybe the buyer won't. Probably going to cost you some money. You're going to have to give everything back and then pay them for all the money they spent. But in some situations, I've seen that work. Seller can't get out in time for closing. I blame listing agents for this. If you're selling a house with a hoarder in it, you need to know how much time it's going to take them to get out. You need to be counseling with them. That's your fault. That's your fault. Seller doesn't get repairs done. Again, listing agent, your fault. You're not staying on them. Okay. Stay on top of these people. Seller leaves the house dirty and upsets the buyer. Man, I will tell you, more times people have been pissed off after a great successful transaction because of this. Listing agents, please tell your sellers, hey, can we make it look, if they don't have, which most buyers are going to put in there, most buyers agent, house to be fresh and clean. That's not in there. And they're not asking for it, but at least have them go through the basics, at least broom it out, sweep it out, but also set the right expectations, buyers, agents. Hey, listen, my idea of cleanliness and many of you women on here is very different. I mean, I'm all about the 10-second rule. I think my floor is good enough. We're good to go. Everybody's idea of clean is different things. So just set the right expectation up front, please. Because boy, they get bent out of shape. I had one the other day, email me, mad like you wouldn't believe, because they bought that house from our listing and it's dirty when they moved in. The drawers were dirty and the windowsills were. I'm like, dude, I can't make them clean their house. You didn't write it in the contract. I don't know what you want from me. Like, I'm not coming to clean it. Closing and follow-up. Do you do a closing gift? Yeah. I mean, that's your prerogative. I don't set those. Manage the breakup. Manage the follow-up. Yes, they're selling, but they can be great referral partners. That guy over at JLA, that girl at JLA, they were easy to work with. They sold my house in record time. You want those referrals. Believe me. All right. So we've gone through sellers. Folks, what was complicated about this? Ask yourself, all this hubbub, all these webinars, everybody's scared to death. What was hard about this? What was difficult? What was it here that you can't do? What back here on the listing agreement is it not possible to do? Tell me. I mean, this seems fairly cut and dry to me. Right here. Yes, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, it's negotiable. But here's all the reasons I think you should pay a buyer's agent. All you got to do, and you want the buyer, because you're going to be a buyer's agent too. You're not just listing agents, you're buyer's agents too. We've got to do a good job of explaining the value, and then it goes right here. I think it's easier to do now than it was before. I love it that they slapped all this together under one paragraph and I don't have to jump back and forth. So here's my takeaway. And this chair, I don't know if you guys noticed, I start out up here and all through the call, it drops me because I need a new chair. Here's my takeaway, because we're done. We're done. Okay, you've done boot camp, but do not get off here. There's 282 people still on here. If you get off here, I'm going to come get you. Here's what I need you guys to remember. Nothing we talked about this week is difficult. Nothing. The last 2 days, we've gone over buyers and sellers. If you really break it down, it's not that hard. Yeah, it's not as easy because the MLS is not protecting us with the buyer's commission. I get that. I 100% get that. But the documents are there to protect you. We're going to look sharper, be sharper, because we have new documents that make us look even better. But here's what you've got to do. You're going to have to go out here and sell your worth. Now, many of you have been on my calls. And again, if you're not on my Monday and Thursday calls, you need to check yourself, because there's some good info. But here's what I'm going to tell you. You now have to start providing Bucky's experiences to these people. Give it to them. Tell them what you're going to do. Show them what you're going to do what you were going to do, and they will not have a problem paying you your money. They will not. I just went through the contracts. They're not that hard. There's not that many changes. There's just not. If you'll notice, I didn't even put some of them in here. They're irrelevant. I went through the ones that matter, the ones you're going to use every day, the ones that's going to keep you successful in this business. But it's out here. It's going to be good. Oh, get back here. Now, do we have, is there anything that we need to go over? Anything that I missed? Let me get mine back up here, because I'm at the end here. Make sure that we
Hey,
didn't.
John,
Yeah,
there
talk
was
to me.
a lot of questions about, so we need to know your opinion of sellers' disclosures on vacant land.
Sellers disclosures on
lots.
vacant land. So here's the thing about sellers disclosures. They have a section in the sellers disclosure that talks about flooding, right? Vacant land can flood. So here's the deal. Here's the easy answer. You can never go wrong disclosing stuff. Ever. You're never wrong over disclosing. So why not do a seller's disclosure on vacant land? Because it could flood. So you're gonna check no on everything, but the flooding section you can talk about. I think you should do it. Why would you not disclose?
Hey, John.
Yep.
There's also on open land, they'll ask about wetlands, they'll ask about underground tanks, they'll ask about utility easements. If you know that stuff, the buyer's going to want to know it.
Yep. And you're the man to tell us about it, because you do a whole lot of that vacant land, brother. So yeah, I again, if you've got to ask yourself, should I be doing it? You probably should be doing it. Just my personal opinion. Okay. If there's that level of doubt in your mind, you probably should just go ahead and just get it done. Other questions? We're here. I mean, obviously I was not watching the chat bar. I have no idea what questions were out there, but you're welcome to unmute and ask away right now. Don't ask them on the chat bar. I'm not scrolling back down to the bottom of that chat bar at this point. It'd be here all day.
Good morning. So there's no separate SD for vacant land, right? So how would we disclose that information as a listing agent?
Go for it, Bill. You're the guy.
It's in the contract. There's also, you can just put it out there create a word sheet if you need to do that. But there is a form out there somewhere I've used. Look under the farm and ranch contract information. It's out there.
I have a question.
Go for it.
This is from yesterday. So on the contract and disclosing if you're related to an agent, I've had different people tell me different things on this. And that's if the seller is a LLC. So let's say that there's an LLC, there's one or two people in that LLC, and one of them is an agent or they're kin to you. Do you need to disclose that on the contract?
Absolutely.
My understanding is yes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
If I can link you back to the buyer or the seller in any form or fashion, you need to disclose it. Again, nobody's going to be like, oh no, I'm not buying because that listing agent is related to somebody that owns that LLC. Nobody's going to ever not buy the property. But what they're going to do, they're going to come back later and say, whoa, you didn't disclose that. You owe me. Okay. So just, yes, if there's LLCs involved, if there's airships involved, if there's anything, just disclose it and you're safe. And you don't have to go into detail. You don't have to say it's my sister's best friend's husband. You just have to say buyer related to buyer's agent, seller related to seller's agent. That's all you got to do. That's all the disclosure you got to do.
Hey, John, I've got a quick question for you regarding LLCs. When we are supposed to verify that those names match the tax rolls, what's the best source to check on the owners of the LLC to make sure we are indeed working with the right people?
Title company is usually my favorite for that, to be honest with you. But yeah, you can search LLCs on the state of Texas websites. They're not as... My thing I would normally tell you is you're going to believe them that they own that LLC and let the title company figure that out. But the title company is going to want their formation paperwork. You got to tell somebody, when it gets to the LLC stage, title company wants to verify that they have signing power on that LLC. So it's formation paperwork. There's some stuff they're going to have to provide. Same thing if it's an estate, right? There's stuff that there's people that have the ability to sign on estates and some people that don't. So anytime it's not a person's name, just like whenever, if you go to the closing table, they need the seller's driver's license and the buyer's driver's license, and they got to be current driver's license. If you're going to sell an LLC or you got some sort of estate, all that, then they're going to need the documentation that proves that's who they are and they have the ability to sign. A little harder for us. Yes, sir, Bill.
All LLCs have to be registered with the Secretary of State of the state of Texas, and you have annual reports, and you have to list contact the agent of that LLC, and that's public record.
Right, you can find it. You just have to Google it.
John, another thing that I learned from working at the title company was a lot of the LLCs have to be in good standing too. The seller can't sell if they're not active.
Yeah, and you can get your LLC can get out of good standing pretty damn fast too if you don't do your annual paperwork, and then you're out. I mean, you can re-up it, but it takes 2 or 3 weeks to get the paperwork over. Ask me how I know.
I have another question based on, we were talking about the mud form, and if it's not delivered within.
But before the contract's executed.
So I know we can pull out of the contract as a buyer, but do they also get their earnest money back at that time?
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
I've got a question. It's Virginia.
Go for it.
I have somebody who sold land in Walden. I don't know. It's probably 3 years, 4 years ago. And the title company, he only owed, I think, like $250 in taxes on it. And the title company, right, gave that money to the buyer. But he keeps getting billed for it. And he's going crazy. And I've had him call him. I've had him, send them the closing docs, but it doesn't get corrected. Is there anything more I can do?
Title company can correct that for him.
Well, they keep not doing it.
Well, you may have to just go sit in their office until somebody corrects it. But yes, they can correct it.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Folks, business as usual. I hope you pull that out of this. I hope you pull business as usual out of this. It's not that big of a deal. It's been blown up out of proportion. Some people are not just sitting here and saying, this is how we're going to do it, and this is what it's going to look like. But hopefully your takeaway the last 2 days is I got this. This isn't that hard. Now, we can't control the other side because in most transactions, there's an agent on the other side that may not know what they're doing, that may not be there yet, but let's have grace. Let's have patience. Okay. We part of our job in this, is education and helping people. And we try to do a really good job with our buyers and sellers. We may have to take that approach with some agents out here. You are well-versed. You are comfortable now. You feel 1,000 times better than you did a week ago on these contracts. Nobody's out here like, there ain't anybody on this call that says, nope, I can't do this. I'm getting out of the business. Because it doesn't look that different. It doesn't look that different. So you're going to be comfortable. You're going to be confident. Now you're going to have a lot of people that aren't. And when people aren't confident and comfortable, they like to argue. They like to armor up and fight. So let's have a little grace. Let's have a little understanding that a lot of people just aren't where you are, but this is where you're going to rise to the top. You're going to be amazing, right? And great things are going to happen. You're going to go out here. You're going to counsel with your buyers. You're going to counsel with your sellers. We're going to put those people together and go to a closing table. Okay. And it's business as usual. To me, the bigger issue in real estate is, can we get some homeowners insurance premiums to drop? Can we get some interest rates to come down? Those are our big issues in real estate, not these documents, and not because we're going to go out here and we're going to do a good job of explaining our value, explaining our worth. We're going to give them Bucky's experiences, and they're going to want to use this every time. So relax, just chill, just keep doing your business. Number one thing you should be doing all day, every day, marketing and prospecting. You go get those buyers and sellers, and it takes care of all your problems. Okay. Go for it. Somebody needs to talk.
Virginia, I got one more question. Are we allowed to say, I recommend?
Yeah.
All right. Now, they say they know that the rules are changing here. And so, I could say, you get to choose, I recommend.
Yeah, because you're the expert. What you can't say is the standard is. That'll get you.
Okay.
Okay. But you can say, I recommend all day long. Absolutely.
Okay. I got one yesterday. It worked.
Yeah. And so here's the thing. We are the experts. The buyers and sellers are leaning on us. We are the ones that they're out here, and we've got to, number one, we got to earn our worth, and we got to tell them what we're going to do, and we got to do it. But they're leaning on us, and they want us to lead them down that path. As long as we're doing our job and we're telling them what we're doing, we do it with class and style and proficiency and professionalism. Well, you're not going to have any problems. Now, we all know there's realtors in this business that don't have any of those things, and they're going to get out, and that's just fine. Great. That's better for the rest of us. But I just need you to relax. When I was going through these forums, I thought I felt very comfortable. Then I started watching all these webinars, and I'm like, God, what are they doing? Like, it was just making my head hurt because they weren't explaining it, and they were trying to make it more difficult, and it's not that difficult. We got a little bit of a learning curve, got a little few bumps in the road. We're here. I shared Kim and Amanda's contact information up front. Mine's in there. Your manager's locked and loaded as well. They've all been on this call. They all know what they're doing. Okay. But we're going to communicate really well, and you're not going to have a problem. Yes, Charlie.
Sorry, but looking at the broker's comp on the buyer's rep, and maybe I missed this. Where do we put BTSA with the new?
You can't, not until. So you're not going to, buyer's rep, you're not going to know there's a BTSA because you're signing that before you go show houses. So You're only going to put that in there. BTSA will come on an amendment to the buyer's rep. There's a one-page amendment, and I don't have that up on my screen. The one-page buyer's rep amendment is where you can put in, I got to go ahead and get your approval to take this BTSA.
Got it. Okay. Got it.
Yep.
I have a question.
Yeah.
On the MUD changes, the link that is in the presentation, it's not pulling up.
Probably not going to work. Probably not working because that link got blasted.
Okay.
That presentation was from last year at this time, but I keep putting it in because people aren't using it. They're calling us and saying, "Where'd the MUD form go?" I'm like, "What rock you living under? That MUD form hadn't been available for a year." So my greatest fear, my absolute greatest fear is next May, somebody's going to call me and be like, "Hey, what's going on with these new forms?" And I'm going to lose my mind.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the website actually so that I can find the paperwork, the form.
What are you talking about?
So it says check the following website to see if the water district lists your listing falls, what listing your falls into, so that you can obtain the notice to purchaser. But that website's not correct.
It used to be correct, and I know it got so inundated by realtors when it came out that it was like a problem. But you should be able to go to the tax records, find the MUD.
Okay.
And go to that MUD's website And most of them, the MUDs got so inundated by realtors that they were forced to put it all on their website. I can tell you what happened here. The real estate, the state of Texas Commission made the real estate agents police for the MUDs. We became the police force because they weren't doing this. It's been required for years that they have that as a notice, and they weren't doing it. So they turned the realtors loose on them, and these poor MUDs got inundated. And so they all of a sudden, they should be I don't know of a MUD right now that doesn't have it loaded on their website. So just go, if it's 193, go to their website. It'll be up there because they got tired of hearing from realtors, because you know how we are. If you got one form that's holding up a closing, we will sit on your doorstep until we get it. So you don't really need that. My thing was just more on the MUD, is make sure people know that needs to be done as part of the listing packet before you go under contract, or it leaves it wide open for the seller or the buyers to be able to terminate.
Thank you. I was able to find their website and found the form.
Good. See, there it is.
Posted both links in the chat bar for the district directory and the TECQ. They're both listed in the chat box.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, folks. I appreciate, for those of you that got on, again, I apologize for the technical difficulties yesterday. We had 0 technical difficulties today. Big shout out to Kim and Amanda. Appreciate those two more than they'll ever know. I know that chat bar was running nonstop. I could see the number going up the whole time. And the rest of you, I know I heard yesterday, I know Danny was helping out, Whitney Rivers was helping out, different people were jumping in and helping. That's what makes JLA powerful, is that we're all in this together. And you're not an island. We will help you. That's what we do. Even if you're on here and you're non-JLA and you're another brokerage, we're here to help. It's what we do. It's who we are. It's what's going to make us win in the next phase of real estate. So now you're confident. You're going to go out here. You've got no problems tackling this. And as we move closer to August 17th, we're going to have more. We're going to do some more, like, just refresher what you should be doing, how you should be communicating this. And remember, we've got 2 live boot camps coming up. Show up. I promise you it'll be fun. I may stand on a chair with a wig on there. Let me take it to that direction. But we're going to have those all fall. I want to get you there. I want you to understand this stuff. I want it to be comfortable. I heard from many agents yesterday that had not been to a JLA boot camp and they loved this. Hey, the live version, 10 times better. So take care. Be safe. If you need something, if you still got questions, text, email, call Kim, Amanda, John, your manager. I know that everybody on it, Danny, the practice, Terry Myers. I don't care who it is. We're all out here. We're all here to help. If you need something, don't walk around in the dark right now. We will help you get where you need to go. I will have this thing posted later today. I'll get them both up on Back Agent by this weekend, and we'll be rocking and rolling. Thank you again. Hopefully you feel better. You're comfortable, and we are no longer worried about these contracts. It's not that hard. Take care. Be safe. Thanks again, everyone.